Hey, everybody. Warm welcome to Impossible Live. Welcome back if you're joining us again. And if you're joining us live, let us know where you're joining us from. And if you're popping in on replay, please don't hesitate to share the magic of Joyce Francis out with someone you know who can use an opportunity to discover her talents. And as Joyce is joining us today, I am delighted to say I've had the pleasure of knowing this beautiful woman for quite some time. And it's funny, considering we're both New Yorkers, we have not met in person yet, and we have to fix that part. One of the things I want to laugh about is and thank you so much for popping in and sharing light and spreading seeds about Joyce. Is today Joyce Francis and I had the pleasure to meet because Joyce picked me in Business Mentor New York, and this was as we said last week. Reminds you of the song way back when. We've kind of known each other for a little bit. We've known each other's voices, and one of the things I really appreciated. Hey, Leslie, how are you? Warm welcome. Thank you for popping in and joining us. Is I had the pleasure in the process of getting to know Joyce was understanding that on paper I would be an ideal future client for her. So I have to really thank her, not just for picking me. And, I say it all the time, the right people we need, they're in the room, they're in the universe. There are angels on earth, and this lovely woman is one. As I'm introducing her, and the one thing Joyce will absolutely laugh about is that we really could have met in person. And we just haven't taken advantage of the opportunity. So, Joyce, we are going to fix that this year. I'm butchering the story of how we met, other than Mel was an ideal future client. But, Joyce, for those who have not had the pleasure to check out your amazing page or to pop in, hey, Christy, who have not had a chance to pop in during We Rise and Soar open house to see your magics and get to know your beautiful voice, Joyce, please introduce yourself. And thanks
Hello.
and warm welcome to Impossible Live.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Joyce Francis. I am the founder of Omega ElderCare Services. We provide care, care management, ongoing care management. We provide training to new caregivers and potential caregivers. We provide support and advocacy. What is really important is being present through the entire process. When I met Mel, she started out being my mentor. The thing that struck me about her was that she was listening, that she was present. We're not perfect. Nobody is. And before I go any further, I want to share with you one of my favorite essays. It's called The Value of a Human Person. We are living in a culture that measures the value of the human person by degrees of success and productivity. What is your title? How much money do you make? How many friends do you have? What are your accomplishments? How busy are you? What do your children do? But it is important for us to remember that as we grow older, our ability to succeed in this way gradually diminishes. We lose our titles, our friends, our accomplishments, and our ability to do many things because we begin to feel weaker, more vulnerable, and more dependent. If we continue to look at ourselves from the point of view of success, our condition is not a good one. Because of our strong cultural vision, it is a huge challenge to look at vulnerability not as a negative thing, but as a positive thing. Do we dare to look at weakness as an opportunity to become fruitful? Fruitfulness in the spiritual life is about love. And this fruitfulness is very different from success or productivity. But on renown. Caregiving. I've been a caregiver both personally and professionally. Caregiving is one of the most challenging things we will ever have to do, especially if you are in a work environment that does not understand, much less support, where you are as a caregiver. Caregiving is an opportunity. I know, like what you're talking about, Joyce. It is. It's an opportunity to become somebody's advocate, somebody who is going to stand up for the care and well-being of another human being. It is enormous. It is enormous. And at this place in our society where people mistake weakness, people mistake generosity and compassion for weakness, it's really crucial that caregivers, and there are millions of us in America, over 69 million people who are caregiving unpaid. And it is, the economic toll is in billions. There was somebody on LinkedIn who assessed his caregiving at $1 million. I disagree. Caregiving is priceless. Caregivers are essential to our society. The entire society is getting older, whether we like it or not, whether we're taking lotions and potions, we are getting older. And we're all going to be in a place where we are feeling weak and vulnerable, and we need somebody. Right now, there isn't enough care, there isn't enough time and energy to go around. We've got so many things going on. We are a society, we have focused on busyness. We have focused, as Henri Nouwen would say, on success. We have focused on all these interesting markers of what it means to be a person. But regardless of all these contrivances, we are still human beings. And caregivers are holding the fabric of our society together because we are offering compassion, we are offering empathy, we are offering a hand to hold in the midst of the most vulnerable time. People are scared. They're lonely. And in our society, a lot of them feel that they don't have any value. How we got to this place, I don't know. But we cannot continue to ignore the growing needs. We cannot continue to say, well, if you can't do X, Y, and Z, and if you're not on LinkedIn or on Meta and you're not getting likes and dislikes, then you don't matter. The value of a human being, it's always going to be priceless. So,
Well, I
Bill
really
Withers,
want to thank you not only for sharing your poem, but for sharing so much from your heart of why this is so important to you and why it should be more important to us in terms of really being able to see others' value. I think one of the cool parts is Mike says, know thyself, love thyself, live life loved and loving. I think we lose it, Joyce. I always think it's interesting in the process of preparing. I'm sorry, going right ahead.
No, I completely agree. And we lose it because we've gotten to the place where we are we've been programmed to operate on a superficial level. We've been programmed to judge people in ways that aren't valid, but we seem to think they are. We have game shows, we have all these things where people subject themselves to all kinds of horrible stressors for approval. We're losing our connection. We're losing our connection. And I am proud to be a caregiver, have been both on a personal and professional level. But for those of you who are of a certain age, play Bill Withers' Lean on Me. It is the caregiver's anthem. It is the caregiver's anthem.
What words? What
And Bill
words in the what's? And Joyce, thank you for pointing out that you picked today's session title. So, when you picked this song, "Lean on Me,"
Mhm.
what popped out? What spoke to you?
Almost the entire song. It starts out, sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. And caregiving is a tough place to be emotionally, financially, looking at all the things that, especially if you're in the sandwich generation, you're trying to work, and the people in the office are literally pounding on your door. They've got this, that, and the other to do, but you've got an ill parent, you've got a dying sister, you've got things to do that are more important to you, but they're not important to them at all. And you need the check, okay? Because you have things to pay, your bills and other people's bills. And so you have the pain and you have the sorrow. But then Bill says, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Tomorrow, for me and for everybody, starts today. In this society, at this place and time, as caregivers, we are charged with the responsibility of creating tomorrow, not ignoring what's going on, but focusing time and energy into creating tomorrow. If our kids, you're always talking about the fragile AI world, Mel. If our kids grow up with talking to, and they have, on their phones, on their pads, on their talking to devices and calling them in conversations, there are caregivers of tomorrow. What are we going to do when it's our turn and we need care, and we have taught them that you use the device? Is the device going to hold your hand when you're transitioning and hug you and tell you that it loves you? Lean on me, but we have to have solid foundations on which to lean.
I think one of the challenging things is for some of us, and I'll with transparency, I was smiling yesterday, a conversation with my mom, and my mom out of the blue, not knowing that Joyce and I were going live today, not knowing what today's topic was today. My mother asked me, was I a caregiver? I find it interesting, Joyce, because I think sometimes in this process of being a part timer who's trying to help loved ones live the life that they are longing to live, with the quality of life, with the quality of respect, with the quality of acknowledgement. I just thought it was really funny for the timing that mom was asking me yesterday. Because I'm finding in this process of being a part time caregiver, and that varies as, our families have different needs and different health
Mhm.
challenges occasionally that they're experiencing. We're attempting to support them. But I found it so funny that mom asked me yesterday. And what I had to learn as a part time caregiver is to always define that role through her lens. Mom doesn't need a hand, mom doesn't need extra help until she is ready, when she is ready. And I think that's one of
Mhm.
the things that's challenging about the caregiving role is sometimes we're not invited to it. It just pops up, and it pops up like Joyce is explaining from a really important sense of to-dos for somebody we love and we care about. And I love that Mike was mentioning his sister volunteering for hospice. Mike, I really wanted to be a hospice volunteer, and I learned in the process, not just of hearts and of caring, that it was a role to just really help support and lend light to those amazing volunteers who do volunteer to do so. But I think the hard part, Joyce, is for some, the lean part is impossible. And and that's the one thing I think when we look at it, not from just from a leadership perspective, not just from supporting legacies or generations of family members, but there has to be a willingness. If the person's not interested in the lean,
Mhm.
the right support, it's sometimes impossible to provide it. One of the things I love, Joyce, as you're preparing for your workshops this month, and I know you're going to help us with the checklist things, but you had mentioned a checklist that you had of 10 of of a 10-point checklist. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because you had mentioned it before, but I want to make sure that our listeners who are listening live or who are listening on replays have a chance to just discover some of the gems and the resources that you're offering those who may be part-time caregivers and may soon be full-time caregivers.
First of all, Mel, part-time caregiving is not what you're doing. If you are investing your time, your thought, and your energy and your love into somebody that you care about, you are a caregiver. It isn't something that, yes, there are people who do caregiving all day long for most of their lives. There are 69 million unpaid caregivers, but you are a caregiver. So when mom asked you, yeah, yes, the answer is a resounding yes. And it is, you're really valuable. We are all very valuable people. When it comes to my workshops, I have 3 different workshops, but the one Mel is referring to is a 10 key considerations for caregiving. One of the big considerations is an assessment of your resources. Where are you right now? No guessing, no trying to pretty things up. Where are you in terms of, do you have the financial resources? Do you have the psychological resources? Do you have the legal resources? Do you have family support? And as somebody who comes from a big family, you'll be surprised how upset and how much distance people put between themselves and the person needing care when they realize that somebody's growing old and they can't take care of themselves anymore and they can't take care of you.
Leslie's asking you also, have you heard about the position of an end-of-life doula?
Yes, I'm trained end-of-life doula, and it is something that during the training, I was choking back tears because I remember occasions when, like when my dad was dying, and I was able to, he'd been ill for 10 years. He had 2 strokes. And I was able to stand in the mirror and rehearse what I was going to say to him because he knew every inflection. He knew everything that came out of my mouth. And although he couldn't talk, he was bedbound, I knew that being there at this point when he was transitioning was not just crucial to his calm and loving passage, but to my mental health. So being an end-of-life doula is huge. And not only is it a matter of your being present and compassionate, and sometimes you just have to sit there and be very quiet. Sometimes at the end, people aren't really aware, but aware on a level where they're awake, but they're still aware. They can still hear you. You have to be very mindful of the things that you were saying. So the end-of-life transition hospice care is a crucial component of elder care. And if you can't do it, that's okay. Not everybody is up to certain jobs. But you do need to know that there are things and there are people who can help you and ways to access. And that's one of the things on my 10-point checklist is accessing the proper resources to support you. Taking an assessment of the gaps in where you are and what you have and figuring out who is there to support you. And if it's a church community, if it's your synagogue, if it's your mosque, if it's your best friend, gotta tell you, I have some solid friends. I love them. One or 2 of them might be on the call. I absolutely love them. And they have supported me through a lot of my caregiving journey.
I think as you're mentioning this, and thank you, Marcia, for mentioning one of the challenges too from this perspective is when you're going through this as a family member, because sometimes we're not necessarily in the same city as our family member. We may
Mhm.
not necessarily have had access to some of the resources to support them. As you're mentioning too, and I really appreciate it, there are a lot of not for profits, and hospice is an amazing resource that a lot of people aren't really sure how to access or when to access. But Marcia is mentioning the reality from a perspective of financial investments. Those who aren't well prepared for this, from a documentation perspective, from the conversations that one might have with a family member who's going, whose needs are changing. And
Mhm.
in some cases, those of us who don't necessarily have permission to actively participate in the medical process as they're making decisions. I remember one of the things that I was so appreciative about when I met Joyce was the understanding that I understood my role was changing before there was an opportunity to step into it. And what I love about what Joyce is sharing with us are that there are opportunities to support our families, our friends, our neighbors on so many different levels. And many of us, we're just not really sure where to start. So, Joyce, for the person who becomes an overnight caregiver, because many of us, you get that call, you know,
Mhm.
that something's happened to a loved one or someone needs support. We got a call yesterday from a dear cousin who I'm really delighted is progressing in their own caregiving journey. We didn't have an opportunity to communicate when they needed a caregiver, but now on the other side, they're deeper in the journey. So they called to kind of catch up. In that catch up part, in some cases, we don't receive permission. And Marcia is mentioning the work part of this from employers who are flexible with their schedule. But there's a real opportunity here in both sides for the
Mhm.
flexibility. The the invitation to support someone isn't always engraved. It's not always clear. We're not always sure how. For some of us too, that invitation may come from a social worker in a healthcare system. It's not necessarily coming directly from the family member. But I appreciate what Marcia is saying because there are the two sides of it. And Joyce mentioned it before too. There's the work side. You've got that full time job, whether
Mhm.
it's in the office, whether it's hybrid, and you're trying to navigate from that perspective of volunteering for a more active role to support a family member. And I know this is something you go over in your workshop, so I'm so not trying to get you to give us all your secrets.
No, I I fully understand. Um, First of all, when you are, I've gotten the call. I've gotten the call from, I was in grad school and it was Holy Week. I was exhausted and I got a call from an aunt that I had by marriage. My one of my siblings had married um, their relative, divorced their relative, and I still had the aunt. She was on the phone. She was breathless and telling me I had to come now. I already had keys to her home. I had been her caregiver for, as you say, part time. I've been a real caregiver to her and trying to work, trying to go to school. And she said, "Oh, oh." I thought, dear God, let me go rush over there. I got a car, got to the other side of Brooklyn to find that she wasn't really in distress. So there are times, absolutely times and situations where you need to approach this, not just delicately, but with your head. My dad would say, when things are tough, it's use your head, not your heart. I think you need to use both. But you need to be aware that your version of care, your version of compassion, your version of intervention might not at all be in sync with what they need. And you get to ask, and that's why I'm advocating for people asking, talking to your loved ones early. Have, like they used to say, the birds and bees, the kids could read that stuff. Have these conversations early where they could tell you what they want. They can decide for themselves who they want around, who they don't want around, what they want and what they don't want. You start those conversations early, then you are not running around. And sometimes you got to be prepared. Caregiving requires a tough skin. You got to be prepared to get your feelings hurt, because you're going to get your feelings hurt. You are going to get your feelings hurt. And especially when it's a close family member and you are saying, as I did, um, I really would like it if you would get all of your legal documentation in order. Here are the forms, okay? I'm emailing forms. To this day, when my younger sister died during COVID, she didn't have COVID, um, I sent her her papers months before she did it. But 2 weeks before she died, she got it done. And that put me in a much better position than I would have had if she hadn't gotten them done. You We're thinking that we can speak for people. We're thinking we know what they want us to do, but we really do need to have conversations and ask them what they want to do and to get them to put things down on paper. And that's one of the things I'm going to stress in my workshop is getting yourself organized. And if you can't do it, find a friend, put the papers in a paper bag, get some folders, a notepad, and find somebody to help you get organized. And I am giving people labels with the things that I think they need to have in order. It's a Redwell and Staples and labels. It's really crucial to be organized. There is a component of elder care where you absolutely do not know when the next crisis is coming. But there's some of us who are living in crisis mode. You know what you get from crisis mode, living in crisis mode? Your entire body's on high alert. You are killing yourself. You're no good to anybody dead. Unless, of course, you're running for Martyr of the Year. And to those people,
You're reminding me of the scary part. I still have a caregiver newsletter that I subscribe to. And one of the scariest things was when I started the subscription was reading an article that was written about the number of caregivers who do not live longer than the people they are caring for. So, as Joyce is saying, from the process of having a plan, this is part of having a plan A, having a plan B, having a plan C. And many of us at different stages in our life, we have no plan. I laugh all the time when mom asks me questions because we're at that point where I know every question is an opportunity for a discussion if mom is interested in the discussion. So when she asks me questions like this, sometimes I don't answer because I'm waiting to see or hear the mom story or listen for the cue,
mm-hmm.
or in some cases, listen for that piece of information that she's trying to carefully communicate. One of the things that really caught me so much, and it's not just me, it's happening to a lot of other people. You'll notice in my posts about live streams that I'm wishing others well from a perspective of people they're taking care of and people they're celebrating the lives of. Some of the really young people that we know have no documentation. They're at an age where they're not thinking about life insurance. They're not thinking about long-term care. They're not thinking of prepaid expenses. And but I do know the one thing I know from a soul level is that challenge of having that conversation with someone who isn't ready the very first time. My beautiful sister-in-law called me at work, and some of you have heard the story from other angles, from the toxic workplace perspective. And I knew when she called me that day that spending that day with her was critical as opposed to being at work. So as Marcia is saying, when you're in a situation and you have an opportunity and this is somebody you care about, sometimes you're going to get a call just like Joyce did. And in that case, it wasn't a call where her assistance was needed. Someone maybe just needed a little more support, or they needed a little bit of a break. But Mike and Marcia are mentioning from the perspective of losing childhood friends, from being around people who have a terminal illness, are opportunities for communication in this process. Sometimes we can ask, other times we need to wait for the answer. Other times we need to be prepared for the challenge of the discussion. But I do know from that call I got that day and years later hearing my Nana say, doctor told me my expectations of your grandfather's life expectancy were unrealistic. Sometimes people who are facing health challenges, battles, and we know how family dynamics change in every family. Joyce is mentioning hers. I'm grateful to be mentioning my mom, who will always have a question, and we'll laugh. But I think Marcia is mentioning just what Joyce is saying about having the proper documents and having all of your family's documentation in order. It is a gift for a family member. It is a gift for those who need to navigate in your absence. And occasionally, it's a step to helping us prepare, because that process of decision making, it is hard enough. And I'll say this as a manifestor or initiator from a human design perspective. Someone said a while ago, yes, no answers are hard for me. Ask me answers about what I'm interested in terms of end of life steps. There is total clarity, and I'm willing to have the conversation. I think sometimes family members aren't ready at the same time for the discussion. So because you're ready, somebody else needs to take a breath. Absolutely. They need a chance to think about it. And in some cases, us asking others to prepare family documentation, people are worried we have a hidden agenda in mind. We're looking to get into their underwear drawer, for lack of a better word, and I think approaching
communication is absolutely key up front. And they know me. My siblings know me. They know my friends know me even better. They know that if I am asking a question, it isn't because I have nothing else to do. But yes, there is concern. There is, sometimes it's real concern. Sometimes it is completely unfounded, but it's still their concern. And that's where you have to go. If somebody is saying to you, I'm not ready, then they're not. And you've got to step back. But that is, for me, what I call conscious caregiving. And it's one of the things that I'm going to discuss with folks. Conscious caregiving means that you are listening, not to hear what you want to hear, not to decide what you need to respond, how you need to respond, but listening to what they're saying. And often I've found that we're not so good at that, especially those of us who are busy. We have a lot going on. And I got to tell you, when you were talking about plan A, B, oh, please. When I was 8, I was on plan Z subsection, 10. And so my brain, that's how my brain works. And my relatives know that. And for them, that's how I became crisis manager, because they were like, Joyce got it figured out. I don't have to worry. But you do. And listening is really key, really, really key. Not what you want to hear.
But Joyce, in the absence, in a point where where listening is key, and where there are multiple family members,
Mm-hmm.
And today's title, before Lean on Me, we put the word leadership. There's an opportunity there, I think, from the perspective of the person who needs care, for them to lead us. They can light the trail, they can light the path. They can help remove some of the hurdles or the obstacles. That
Mm-hmm.
question of, are your paperwork is your paperwork in order? I was the oldest, so I was the kid who sat in the lawyer's office, and I watched the documentation
Mm-hmm.
without necessarily having a chance to really ask a question of the lawyer preparing the documents,
Mm-hmm.
or of my parents as they sat in the lawyer's office. I do remember realizing how serious it was because my pop put on a suit and a tie to go see the lawyer. And I knew then for him, there was some seriousness behind this. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was kind of an interesting outfit because he was a t-shirt guy, t-shirt and give him a cap. But I found it kind of interesting, the seriousness when he finally was ready to approach it, that he went kind
Mm-hmm.
of full out.
Mm-hmm.
And I always knew women over Pop had on a suit and a tie. And I don't think he realized it. I would listen a little more intently. He was acknowledging that the day there was some sort of exchange that was going to happen from the perspective of power. He wasn't ceding power. He wasn't ceding control. He wasn't giving it up. He wasn't surrendering it. He was explaining the terms on which he wanted us to follow his guidance and follow his instructions. I think that, as Marcia's putting, from a bank authorization perspective, because I think that's the scariest one that we just discovered last fall with friends, an only child passed who was the daughter of an only child. No cousins, no siblings, no nieces, no nephews. And in the absence of her having information on her bank account,
Mm-hmm.
there's that money was not available for her end of life expenses, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
available for her bills, wasn't available to be left and used in a fashion in which anyone would have an inkling of what her intentions were. And I think, as we were driving our bonus mom around, to try and take care of business, I'll never forget the look on her face when she came out of that bank, because there are surprises behind every wall, behind every conversation, and we're always talking about the challenges of having conversations, and challenging ones. Some are welcome, some aren't. But if you are single, if you do live alone, think about putting someone else's name on your bank account, not so they can operate in your presence, but if needed to, in your absence, to help you maintain the standard of care that you're interested in. And I think that part is the hardest conversation, when people are involved and there's funds involved and people are worried about who's spending what or who's taking care of what. As Joyce is saying, just in some cases show up and really be ready for the call, because that call is coming.
The call is
And
coming.
I think about it from the perspective of, I'm not a parent, I'm an auntie, I'm a godmother. You think of it from that perspective of, have I left enough clarity,
Mm-hmm.
and have I left enough of a signal or a roadmap for someone else who's grieving to follow, or to use as a lens to process, so they know what you care about.
Right. Write it down. Talk to them, even if you have to write it down and stash it somewhere, let somebody know. But the sensible thing is to have at least a durable power of attorney. You're giving them access to your bank. You give it to your bank account. You're giving them access to things that they would not normally have. You can't just show up at the bank and say, "Hello, I'm sorry, but my mom just died, and I know she has money in your bank." You have to know where these things are and how to administer them properly. The state will be only too happy to take the money. There are billions of dollars that go unclaimed every single year because people don't even know that they exist. These accounts exist. I mean, there are people, and I'm sure I have an aunt or two, who has been throwing money every week. And you talk about angel numbers, putting money, a certain amount of money, an angel number, in the bank every week. And that is adding up to a hefty sum of money, more than enough to cover their funeral expenses. But you don't know that it's there. You don't know that it's there. And if you start early, you start asking questions and you say, okay, I need to know where this is. I need to know where your ID is. I need to know where your Medicare card is. I need to know where things are and assure them. And that's the thing about leadership. You have to build a trust relationship. You can't just show up and start to say, Auntie, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. A trust relationship is crucial to your success as a caregiver, especially when you are in charge of administering someone's estate.
I think one of the things that you're
You are in
mentioning
charge.
too is the
Go ahead,
estate
Mel.
part is one side of it. I'm trying to think also of the person who's listening to us who's earlier in the process of just
Mhm.
trying to prepare. But you said something before that it just is a mic drop. I had a conversation with a relative a couple of months ago who was explaining they had no idea they were now a caregiver and they had no idea where the driver's license was, no idea where the passport was, no idea where the bank account information was, no idea where the debit card is. And I think sometimes we think about these things as, back in the day, I would laugh because we would always say someone had a pocketbook and the world and the treasury was in the pocketbook or in a briefcase or in a certain bag that the person carried. Um, but on the other hand, I think what you're saying about knowing where things are, but in some cases, we're not going to receive that permission. We're not going to have that opportunity. We're not going to have that gift. We're not going to have the forewarning that Marcia mentioned that she has all of her family's documentation in order. And that should be a goal for many of us, no matter what our role is, no matter what our age
Exactly.
is, and what stage.
Exactly.
Some of the calls we were getting earlier this year, young folks who weren't at an age of even having purchased a life insurance policy
Hmm.
and, not at that stage of having conversations because there's a Regina Bell song. I think there's a song, All I Want is Forever. And I think that is the fairy tale. And what Joyce is reminding us from the lean on me perspective, you're never sure whether you're going to do the leaning or someone else is going to do the leaning and which direction we're going to lean in or lean from. Joyce,
Exactly.
as we're, and thank you for popping in from the end of life perspective to the current perspective to the reminder that caregiving is a process of transition. You've got some upcoming workshops coming up. What's a good way to find out about your upcoming workshops and who should we invite?
Well, if you are a caregiver or you expect to be a caregiver, and if you have relatives who you know are going to need you at some point, or even if you think they're not going to need you, because sometimes you get dropped in the situation, start thinking about what you need to do as a caregiver. And that's where I start. There are 3 workshops, and the first one is on the 10 key considerations. The second one is navigating the process. So I do an overview of the process and we come up with an action plan together. Here are the things I need to do, and I should get started. Not thinking about them for too long. As my dad used to say, study long, study wrong. Take the bull by the horns, find the courage, but you will know what to do. You won't be spinning around in crisis mode. You will know what action steps you need to take. And the third
If
one
the
is about the
person is
guardianship.
in crisis mode, Joyce, is there a different point that they should contact you other than outside of a workshop? Are you available for those who might be in crisis mode and, a workshop is not the place to, necessarily ask you a question or pick your brain or your expertise? Where should they go to get in contact with you?
You can schedule a free consultation with me, and my link tree is on the under my name on the site. But yeah, you can schedule a free consultation. There's a 20-minute free consultation. Call me and we will talk, and you can be as open and honest and scream if you need to scream for the first 5-10 minutes. But remember, you have 20 minutes. So, and talk about what your concerns are. If you're in crisis mode, and I have gotten calls from all over the country where people are in crisis mode. They weren't clients, but they were friends of friends, and they were people who had heard about me and they were in crisis mode. I will absolutely help you to steady yourself and to come up with something that is not just a plan, but a practical plan, something that you can address. So, yeah, do schedule a
Thank you so much,
consultation.
Joyce. If the person is out of the country, because that's another thing that I've started hearing about is people trying to care for someone who's in a different country, and using combinations of, of cameras and, and local caregivers to kind of stay in touch and keep an eye on a parent. Does it matter where the person calls you is from, or can anyone access your database of expertise no matter where they live?
You can call me and we can talk. My license covers New York, so I cannot give advice that is outside of New York, but I can certainly point you in the right direction. And I did long distance caregiving. There are agencies throughout the globe that will help, and I can definitely find places for you and point you in the right direction.
Well, Joyce, we are honored that you are a warm welcome to Impossible Live. Thank you for joining us today to chat about leadership. Lean on Me. We're looking forward to learning more about your upcoming workshops and more about ways to help support loved ones, neighbors, and really this call to action in a sense. And thank you, Leslie and Marcia, for chiming in, and Mike and Lachelle and Lisa with some gems just to remind us somewhere there's a document we need to prepare for that person who we will lean on and
Absolutely.
and to really give the opportunity to leave the information so they don't have to follow a trail of crumbs, and that it can be easier when there are a number of people and parties involved. We cannot thank you enough for joining us today. Stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, stay in touch, and take great care until we meet again. But Joyce, thank you so much and have a peaceful
Thank you,
day.
Deb.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a peaceful day, everyone, filled with blessings, opportunities, and possibilities. Take great care.
Bye.